you know, just to kind of get everyone back together again.
But
Awesome.
So whenever you're ready.
yeah, stand for the pledge. The pledge of allegiance to the flag.
United States of America. To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the village of New Paltz humbly acknowledges that we are on the traditional lands of the Muncie, Esopus, and Lenape people. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 forced the people to relocate to inhospitable territory far from the bountiful valley and mountains that we inhabit today. The village further acknowledges that much of the physical structure of our village and town was built by enslaved Africans who labored as the property of their owners until 1827 on this very land. We acknowledge and honor the contributions, resilience, and accomplishments of the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, who have overcome historic injustice to inform our past and to inspire our future. The Village of New Paltz encourages everyone to learn more about the contributions and sacrifices made by the Indigenous people and enslaved Africans by visiting the sites that are linked in our agenda minutes. And please, if you have resources that you believe should be included here, contact us. Thanks.
Okay, so for the agendas, we have kind of a mix of things that were added before the agenda was originally published. So I'm just gonna go ahead and move that we adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then we are gonna go into announcements. Anyone from the village board interested in making an announcement?
I have some, or at least one. I'm working this year with Manager Green on making sure Climate Row happens at the county fair. We got off to a kind of late start because we had other stuff going on, but I think we are gonna have enough volunteers to do it, but the Agricultural Society basically gave us the space. So I am collecting volunteers. So the fair is July 29th through August 3rd. Climate Grow is basically a project of Boulder County Climate Smart Communities and all the different municipal climate smart task forces. And you know, New Paltz always a star. So and a coalition of organizations, you know, but you don't have to be involved with any of these organizations to come volunteer. Each shift, I'm setting them up to be 4 hours. For a 4-hour shift, you get in, you know, for free to the fair. So if you're smart, you do a morning shift and then you have the afternoon to just hang out at the fair. So reach out to me in any of the ways you know how. And I shared the sign up link on my Instagram so far. And I have to go ahead and do that on Facebook as well. But email, text, call, talking to me after the meeting, anything like that totally goes. I would really love to have more volunteers and everyone over there.
Any other announcements from village board colleagues? No? Okay, public comment. Anyone from the public interested in making a comment? Come on up to state your name.
My name is Charlotte Moss. I live at 2 Huguenot Street, which sounds grander than it is. It's in the Town and Country condos. Recently, the Ciao Bella restaurant, who we adjoin, the property lines adjoin, changed their lights, and they installed a very fashionable, stylish light, but it has an Edison light bulb, which is unshielded in any way. It's about this big around, I guess, and it hangs down. Very bright. The lights have penetrated over into the line of condos that are right there, and it's really bright. It floods the whole wooded lot that's there and onto our property. We went through the code enforcer, Alex, I think his name is, and he has given us some relief. They put now some kind of material. There's like a little shield around the bulb, maybe like that. So it helps. It does help, and we can see that someone looked into it and it was addressed. It's not perfect. Now, another, issue that's come up because still the light is flooding. So this is, Kathy from our condo group, who's the landscaping committee chair for our condos. We went over and looked, and lo and behold, some large foliage and a tree has been cut down. And it's right on the property line, pretty much in line with the lamp post, the closest lamp post. So the property lines there have always been a little muddy. When the restaurant was La Stazione and it was developed, there's history, and the property lines are a problem because they're not able to be exactly.
Does the apartment complex have a survey?
I think in time, it was just, it was difficult to look into when the restaurant was developed, because before that building, the old train station building was a bunch of offices and things, and there was a land swap, so yes, surveying had to be done, but it was difficult to exactly figure those property lines. There are not markings for all of the different sides of the property lots. But our concern tonight, and we don't, and we're coming here to ask, like, what do we do about this now, is this tree, which is a good sized tree that was cut down. And it was helping to block some of this light. It was a pine tree.
Well, you're definitely not allowed to clear cut numerous trees in the village.
Right.
And you're also not allowed to cut trees within a certain number of feet from a street, but you can cut individual trees on one's property.
Well, okay, so one question is it on their property or is it on our property?
That's where you need to,
Yeah.
Refer to a survey.
Okay, and the tree commission wouldn't be involved?
Just the
in-
private property owners would have the survey information. Yeah.
Okay, because it is far enough from Huguenot Street that's probably not gonna, yeah. Okay,
Would we be able to find the survey map if we go to the deed? Is there?
I mean, sometimes surveys are in building department files.
Right.
Sometimes they are with county records,
That's,
but oftentimes you have to, find your own survey or pay for the surveyor. But you can certainly come here and ask the building department to look at your file or the file for the La Stazione property, and there may be a survey in either one of those files. It's like a percentage of the time that it happens.
but ultimately they are allowed to cut a tree if it's on their property.
Yes.
Even though it was shielding the lights that are in question, and what do we do about, they shielded something, but.
So I've seen the emails where
Yes.
people have contacted the building department, and I was aware of the shield. I think they're also gonna include a timer on that light fixture.
That would be great.
Yeah,
So that's in works,
that's what it was explained to me by the building department.
because then it would be off at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right.
thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else with public comment?
I'm Sharon Roth. I was born here a long time ago, and I'm a member of Full Scale Activists. And today I was on a Zoom call with Patrick Bryan, who is my representative for Congressional District 18. And someone brought up the idea that municipalities could pass resolutions. And they were particularly talking about a resolution to withhold federal taxes because the federal government is cutting so many people off of Medicaid, which is going to happen after the election of 2026, and that they want to withhold the federal taxes in order to help out these people that won't have Medicaid anymore. And I learned today that there are 4 states that have brought forth this idea: California, Connecticut, New York, and Maryland, to withhold federal taxes. And I was wondering if our village board would like to present a resolution of that idea.
So a resolution saying that we would be in favor of New York State withholding tax payments to the federal government?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you haven't, I'm also, I think a bunch of us are in the UAC newsletter group, but if anyone comes across like templates, that makes it so much easier to
We're
kind
gonna
of build.
provide us with the templates.
Sweet,
Yeah,
thank you,
I
thank
think
you,
it's
thank you.
individual 17, New York 1819 is gonna provide us with the template,
Cool,
if we wanna do it.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
I wasn't prepared to comment on the resolution, but since Sharon brought it up and I was on that call as well, I think it's a great idea. And I would hope that you would consider doing that, and there will be a template. So I just want you to know that certainly the UAC leadership supports that concept. Cool, okay. And now, the reason I'm here tonight. On behalf of the UAC Housing Committee, I'm here to talk about the affordable units in Zero Place. It has been brought to our attention that an affordable unit that is also designed for a person with a disability has been left vacant for quite a few months. I'm not clear why that is the case. I happen to know the former occupant of that unit has been in nursing facilities for a few months. If it was held open for her until her status was known, I applaud that effort. But she clearly won't be able to return, and that's been known for quite a while. So I'm not clear why it isn't currently being rented. Not only do we have a paucity of affordable units in New Paltz, and I guess few, if any, that can accommodate a person with a disability. The last minutes online from the Affordable Housing Board was in February, and I noted there was a discussion with Mr. Scheffler, an owner of Zero Place, but no details were given, nor do I know if there were subsequent discussions related to the vacant unit. I urge the Affordable Housing Board to ensure that vacant affordable housing units be promptly filled, and that the list maintained include information about disability. I looked at the list, I don't see disability as one of the points that somebody can get. We are in an affordable housing crisis, and I know you know that. And each and every unit we have needs to be filled promptly. I hope you'll pay attention to that issue.
Thanks, Jackie. So this was brought to my attention by Terry Dolan from the Affordable Housing Board, and I contacted the developer and told them that they, should either explain to the village board or the Affordable Housing Board exactly what's going on. And I encourage them to create a memo to explain, the particular circumstances.
Do you have authority in this, or does the housing committee have authority in this instance?
I think actually New York State has the authority because the developer is in the midst of converting the affordable rental units to affordable condo units. So from the way it was explained to me is that this process is being dictated by the state attorney general's office.
But the status right now is a rental for that
Yes.
building.
Yeah.
So I would assume that the affordable unit,
And I asked the developer
Would be.
to create a memo to share with all of us so we know.
okay, thank you.
And just say, Jackie, just say your full name for the,
Sure, Jackie Brownstein, New Paltz.
thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Tom Denton, also with UAC Housing Committee. The development of apartment complexes on Route 32 North promises the set aside of over 35 affordable units per local law and HUD guidelines. One of those complexes is visibly taking shape. It's not too early to raise questions about how the affordable apartments will be marketed, assigned, tracked, and reported to assure that rentals do follow the law's guidelines. Where and how will data be kept and made accessible to the public, consistent with the law? What is the clear, consistent process with accountable officials to determine compliance or violation? What assurances exist in deeds and covenants that turnover of tenants does not result in changed rental rates for affordable units? Basic questions. At a recent rally, I was proudly describing to an active member of the Lloyd Democratic Committee our 15% requirement for affordable units, and her acid reply was, "Oh, we've had that for years. No one pays any attention to it." I can't vouch for the accuracy of her statement, but it does prompt the kinds of questions I'm asking the trustees to think about and respond to in public forums. The Grounded Solutions Network is a not-for-profit organization made up of land trusts and other nonprofits that support affordable housing. The executive summary of its report, quote, "Inclusionary housing in the United States," states, "Tracking of affordable units remains inconsistent." It continues, "There remains a big gap in the literature in unveiling the administrative practices of inclusive housing programs. While about 1/3 of local governments reported partnering with external agencies to manage IH programs, we find that many programs report either not having a tracking system in place or not knowing if such a system exists. In addition, except for a rather limited number of programs, we do not know in which neighborhoods the affordable units are located, the demographic characteristics of participating households, or transaction lease details for units." End quote. With this exciting opportunity for New Paltz to provide housing for lower income households, we don't obviously want to be a community that is lax in its enforcement or that pops up as a blank in statistical analyses. I urge the trustees to inform and show the public how our local 15% law works fairly and successfully. Thank you. I'll leave this with Mr. Bowden here with a link to the website that I've.
Yeah, I'm curious to see that study. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Hi, guys. I'm Jane Chandler.
Hi, Jane.
I live over on Manheim Road. And I'm here to talk about the New Paltz Apartments. I was very distressed to see that the public hearing was closed after only one session. Very distressed, because would be, if it goes through, and I realize that on your agenda tonight, there is a line item that you have approved the annexation and that you're preparing a resolution for it. So on the record and publicly, I want to state that I'm very opposed to this. And I'd like to just briefly outline why. Mayor and I have discussed it. He knows we have a difference of opinion here. But I really do want to say, I feel that this is and will be, if it goes through, the largest building project in the town, in the village, in the history of the whole municipality. 600 units, which are bedrooms. This is situated on a road that has real issues already. And let me just back up and just say, I feel that this is the mother of all greedy landlord projects. This was proposed 10 years ago with a pilot. It was rejected by the municipality. Now they don't want a pilot, but a pilot is always possible. So the annexation could actually work against, in the future, the municipality and the taxes that something like this would generate. There are transparency issues. There are issues that don't align with the long-term plan for the municipality, even though the finding statement published by the village says that it does. And obviously that was written by the sponsor, and that's common. But I feel that more due diligence should have been given to this project. As you know, the land was apple and pear orchards. The previous paper that was part of the package detailed with a map of where the contamination of arsenic and not antifungal, Vietnam, what they used to kill weeds. What? Pesticides. Pesticides, thank you. Pesticides were, and they are in certain locations, and those have been mapped, but that is not in that map I have not seen in the current proposal. The current proposal said, oh, well, there's arsenic in the soil, which is true, and sort of dismisses it. And it cites a source that predates the previous report with the mapping. The reason that's important is because we're gonna have teenagers, women of childbearing age on that. If they could work out how to do affordable units, which I don't see, then you might have the children there. There is no plan in the soil management plan to remove any of the contaminated soil. They simply are going to cover it as they're doing over at the, on the other side of the highway for the operations center. But this is where people are living. Nobody's gonna be living at the operations center. So 1 foot of soil over contaminated soil, if a couple of kids decide to plant some pot behind their dorm, it could be a problem. Number 2, the traffic. On that street, there are 5 major university parking lots. There's an 86 apartment complex, which I live in. There's a new 55 apartment complex that's going in. There's the UCAT route, there's the Trailways route into one of the university parking lots. There is the parade of school buses that comes up from the high school, up that road. And you can't get out of a driveway at 2:40 in the afternoon because the parade of school buses comes up to the middle school. So that's going to be adding 400 parking spaces, 200 are land banked, whatever that means. And there is only in and out of this complex plan on 32. They have completely blocked off the southern part of it where they could go onto Jansen Road and then go straight to Putt Corners to get out. So everything is going to build up at the corner of 32 and 299. And a few months ago, there were 62 cars in front of me when I wanted to go to Dietrich's. So those are very, very substantial concerns. There are others. There's not a real transparent LLC situation. It's described by the sponsor as a public-private partnership, but the private partners are anonymous essentially. The sponsor has disclosed 2 of the beneficiaries of the LLCs, but not the beneficiary of the 3rd LLC. And I think that we should know, in New Paltz, people in New Paltz deserve to know who is going to be building this. Now, I know there are theories that any apartments that are built will add to the apartment stock, and that's a theory. However, these are academic year apartments. They're 9 months. They're for transients. They're for students. They're not for people who live here full-time, year-round as homes. Additionally, there's the issue of, well, when the kids leave, are they going to have key money? Are there going to be squatters in those apartments? How would that be controlled? Will that create a cost? I know you were on the planning board last time around when this was considered, and there was a piece in the Oracle back then, which is the only archived pieces I could find that said that the estimate of costs additional to the police, and if you're going to be the supervisor, which reputedly we will be, you'll have to deal with this, was very, very different from what was in the proposal. And even in the findings statement, and there are statements in the findings statement of that, very, very disparate. So that, the policing budget is certainly critical in the town. There are a lot of other things that I could go through, but I just think that this really needs a much harder look. And I don't know at this point what you can do about it. I plan to go to the town and also say this and urge them to vote against the annexation. I know that could result in a lawsuit, but people sue people all the time. But I think that this really needs a very, very hard look, much harder than it was given by the village planning board. And I say that because I was involved from the very beginning on the town planning board where I served. I've resigned now for 8 years. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, Jane. Any other public comments? How are you guys doing? Dan Wiscosa. So I am a member of the Affordable Housing Board.
as well as Adele.
You guys come closer so the mic gets you.
Sure. So basically just want to touch very quickly with Zero Place because it's become public knowledge that there is a vacant unit that is ADA compliant. We reached out to the property manager. They took about a month to respond to us about emailing them twice, and then they told us that they have decided to keep the unit vacant for now, was what they said regarding the owners. Which we don't believe they're allowed to do, and if they are, they shouldn't be allowed to do it. The issue is talking about authority, this would be on the state level, and as a board, we need the village's support, both to remain in contact with the developers and also advocate for them to know that this is being enforced, as people have previously stated. The capacity of our board is, I think we currently have 4 members. We're still looking for 1 more, and we primarily go through the applications. Somebody asked about who kind of keeps track of everything, but yeah.
So what I want to add, and to Mr. Denton's point, we found out about this unit being vacant. They did not tell us that it's a vacant unit. And so your concern is correct, that how do we know? We know when we're told it's a vacant unit. And if we're not told, we don't know. I happen to know the person that vacated the unit and when it was vacated and all of that. But this appears to be a stall tactic. They took weeks and weeks to answer our first email, then again our second email. Now I hear you requested a memo. They're probably waiting, but we really shouldn't wait. We have dozens and dozens of people on a list for these affordable units. One of the things I came to ask, apparently there's no way to prioritize these ADA units to people with disabilities. And so if a unit becomes empty and we know about it, we have to put the next person on the list with the most points. Disability is only 1 point. You lived in the village, certain amount of years, that could be 5. So giving a unit such as this to someone without a disability takes that unit off the market, and that person may never get a unit because there's very few. So,
The only reason that there are few is because when we wrote the code, we required all those first floor units to be designed so that they could become ADA units.
yeah, so I mean, that's great, but the application, can we change it on the board?
From what I understand, the application in terms of ADA, sure, you
So then
could
can we
make
say,
it.
you know, can we ask the question, do you require an ADA?
It's just part of
unit?
the law. So we could change the way the affordable housing law is articulated so that the points are.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think
Maybe
this is an
different.
update that we didn't realize last time around needs to happen, but you're like demonstrating it so well right now.
So, I can think of 3 people who could use that.
Yeah, exactly, same.
Yeah, so anyway, we urge you to ask the landlord
So
for
we
that
did,
memo.
yeah, but we
ASAP.
did, and the response that we received is they can't put someone in an apartment if it's standing if they're anticipating change. Like, it's not permitted by New York State, right? The entire conversion from a rental building to an owner occupied building.
So I thought we were waiting for a memo.
You're right, and I'm explaining to you how it was explained to me and the details that would be included in this memo. I don't realize that I'm sharing with you how it was explained to me.
So, I mean, the meeting that we had that you and I were at here with Mr. Shepherd in front of you, when we asked about these units, and what would happen if they couldn't get an affordable person to purchase the unit.
Yeah,
He said he would rent it.
you're right.
So apparently he can rent it, because he said he
Right,
would
but
rent
they're
it.
in the midst of a process for, right?
Well,
I
we
mean,
have
you
to
can
find
roll
out.
your eyes, but like
No,
the
no,
process
no,
is,
I'm
the
just-
process is
And that's a fact.
dictated by New York State. It's not
Okay.
being dictated by us.
All right, it would be great if we could have that, see where that is written somewhere. I don't know, maybe Mr. Shepherd could, or someone from there, show us how, basically what you're saying is you don't think they're allowed to rent it right now.
That's what was explained to me, because they're in the midst of a conversion process.
Okay,
I
so I
believe
think,
those are the details that will be included in the memo.
I think it would be great if we could get.
Yeah, I think that'd be good to look at.
And then just as a last note, because I think we kind of talked about everything, sorry. With the affordable unit, just making sure. I actually completely drew a blank, I apologize. I'll let you guys back to.
Okay, just let us know.
Okay,
Jackie, you got a question?
I do. Does that mean that all the market rate, units are being held if somebody is not in there?
I'm not familiar with New York State law in terms of how this happens.
City and the law is slightly different,
Yeah,
but many landlords who do conversions, what they call as
warehousing.
warehouse empty apartments so that they're getting full price. And so that they can take people in from the outside and don't necessarily have to deal with the tenant, even if the tenant doesn't have a lease.
so
So that's very common.
Yeah, like Jane, thanks for saying that word. I just had like an aha moment. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like what has been going on in the city.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, condo conversion laws could be different in a lot of laws, rent laws certainly are different in the city. It could be checked fairly easily what condo conversion, on the state level, would do and whether this is, you know.
and does that apply to affordable units?
Yeah, I
I mean, I think that's the
affordable units
question.
being warehoused again in the city, they can even do that. I mean, they, you know, they don't usually because there's such a need, but they can.
But maybe we can just get some proof of all of that, that would be awesome. Appreciate it. Thank
So
you.
a condominium conversion and ADA points, so law will follow up. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Affordable Housing Board team.
Any other public comments?
You, trustee, my name is Terry Golden. I live here in the village. I'm also the chair of the Affordable Housing Board. I want to thank my colleagues for coming tonight and presenting their case to you and to also the people that are watching. You know, I think we all, from time to time, forget that. It's not about us in this room. It's about them out there. We need to explain ourselves so they understand. It's almost impossible to explain a vacant affordable housing unit to anybody that's on that list. Thankfully, I've not had to do that yet, but I anticipate that. Someone is going to contact me who's on that list, and they're going to ask me what I can do about it. I'm going to say I came here and I asked for your assistance, whether it's tied up in state law or not. I'm looking for your advocacy. I'm looking for your help. The other thing I'm here to do is every year I'm to come before you and do an annual report for the Affordable Housing Board. The annual report tonight, I'll be honest with you, is somewhat unchanged. We still have 7 units. To the best of my knowledge, we have 6 that are filled and 1 that's vacant. We may have more vacancies, I wouldn't know. We have over 100 people on a waiting list. The board meets, the Affordable Housing Board meets probably 3 or 4 times a year. And each time we meet, there's 10 to 15 new applicants that we approve to be put on the list. So the list is growing. It's not shrinking. Do we need your help on things? Things my colleagues mentioned are important. The other thing we're going to need from you to change the ordinance, we're going to need a rent schedule that includes studio apartments. We're going to have affordable studio apartments on North Chestnut Street. We don't have a rent schedule for that. I would like to see the ordinance say something about if there's a vacancy and the landlord chooses not to fill it, we have some administrative remedy. Other than, well, we're just going to convert this into condominium, so we're going to leave it vacant. Trust me, ladies and gentlemen, when that person calls me, that's not going to fly. It's not going to fly. So we need your help with the rent schedule. We need your help forcing people to not to tell us when there's vacancies and a time frame to fill those vacancies. The whole issue of ADA and disabled folks on the list, I hope you will look at that That is a very difficult thing to do, I will be honest with you, but hopefully you can, see your way to help out there a little bit. And with that, I'll.
Terry, what is the rent schedule regarding studio apartments? How does that work?
Well, right now, we have a rent schedule for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms. We have no rent schedule for a studio apartment.
Wouldn't a studio just be treated like a one bedroom?
Maybe. I'm here, Mayor.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
I would, no, I would
You're
not say
saying you
that.
want,
If it was up to me, no,
but so what are you suggesting? That's what I'm asking.
I think it should be less,
Okay,
because I think a 1 bedroom in the open market, a studio apartment should be less than a 1 bedroom apartment.
right.
So ours should be less, in my opinion.
And Tom, to answer your question, like, we have a rental registration law, so like apartments are being inspected annually, or at least they should be. And also the way nearly every code in this community is enforced, it's either from code enforcement officials or it's from the community. Right, like people on a regular basis ask us, well, how come this particular law is not being enforced about, you know, the way, you know, whatever's going on in my neighbor's property, you know, so it's when neighbors call, it's like, on a daily basis, I see stuff and I call the building department. Like, that's how communities like ours function, so it's not that, like, unknown in terms of how these things work. I mean, I think the advantage that we have as a more manageable community is that we have 7 affordable units. And that the building department knows all 7 of those units and they know what's going on. And when you have a much larger city, it's a different beast altogether.
Well, we're going to have many more than 7.
100%, but the point is,
So I just go to what Terry was saying here about, if I understood you, a lack of or uncertainty of information about when vacancies even occur. And when they do occur and a new rental comes in, do we know that the fees are according to schedule? But that's true?
Yeah, we do know that. We established the rent. As I've said many times before, the village ordinance basically, without naming it, it almost creates a housing board. We recruit people, we determine them eligible. We put them on a priority list. We tell the landlord what the rent is. They have no negotiation. We give the landlord the tenant. They have no negotiation in that up to a point. Now, yes, they can do their due diligence, but we give them the people. We act as a housing. We go in and inspect the units. There's size requirements of these units. So yeah, it's regulated to a point, but the glaring mistake in that ordinance, and look, you did a good job. I've said that 100 times. For a small village trying to set up a housing authority, you did a pretty good job. We need an enforcement piece on vacancy. If there's a vacancy, we have to be notified in 30 days. And they just can't sit on it.
right, so that can be codified, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can I say?
condominium or not. Condominium or not. Oh, I'm gonna go to a condominium
Yeah.
conversion? Well, too bad. We have a
So
local ordinance that
that's
says you're not.
and I think what's been interesting about this affordable housing law is that we've continually learned things and made improvements along the way.
You have, and I appreciate that. And the people.
And you know what we're gonna do next year? We're probably gonna identify something else that needs to be addressed, and we will improve that thing. And we will do that the year after that. I mean, this is how these things work. I mean,
It does work that way. But it's gonna have to work a little faster, in my opinion, on this one.
Can I just say, the Harmon Hall, which is coming online fairly soon, is a totally different system than Mr. Dollar has been talking about. Can I ask you if your board is familiar with how that's going to work?
If you want me,
yeah,
okay. No, we don't know how it's going to work, but the owner has reached out to us and said he would like to coordinate with us.
Okay, the way I understand it's going to work from people in the office, it's going to work like it does in the city. It's going to be a lottery. And like there is in Stuyvesant and other places.
Which office?
Leibow's office.
Well, from my understanding, it doesn't just work as a unilateral lottery, the affordable housing works.
Do you mind if I, so as somebody who's read that law very carefully, the law actually addresses both rental, excuse me, and sales of affordable units. What probably, my guess, wasn't contemplated by this board because it started out as everything was a rental. But the law already establishes that the board that Mr. Dolan chairs is still responsible for providing the names of who goes into those sale units. So the law doesn't allow a lottery to happen. It may be what Mr.
That's
Michael
not
has
what
said.
they've said to me.
Well, it
I
doesn't
know,
matter
and
what
I've had other developers,
I'm not.
I've had other developers insist that they're doing things their own way too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is that, so you think that's not correct?
That is not how it works.
The law doesn't allow.
Okay, so the Age Conservancy link on those, the posts that you guys just put on Facebook for people to find out how to get into the lottery, to try to get one of those apartments, doesn't work.
I think we're
Talking about two different things.
Mike, I think we're mixing apples and.
Well, I just want to try to explain.
The property that she's talking about has no.
Understood, that's what I'm trying to say. The property that Mr. Leibold is doing is not affordable housing units. It's senior housing units. It's not covered by the affordable housing law because it's done specifically for seniors. They are going to do a lottery and I misunderstood. So I was talking, we're talking about the
But
transition.
the public may not get that, is my point. And, I mean, because people, it's hard, there's a lack of communication, and I just wanna be sure that, that the affordable housing people understand, because it's senior housing, and it's senior low income and affordable. And it's a totally different process, and you've maybe got people on your list that might qualify for that, but you're not gonna be able to funnel them to it. So all I'm suggesting is that like we get the information out there and get it synced up.
And we agree,
And-
I mean, we're waiting for him to reach out to us. He told me to wait until that they were ready.
Yeah, and that's exactly, that's,
Talking about you.
and Jane, that's exactly the response that I've,
Understood.
you're talking about Keith Arbette, and that's the same, response that I received when I inquired about how will the process work? How will we be able to share this information, for people to sign up? And he said he will let us know.
I'd just like to add, we had a meeting with Jen Metzger and talked about this very issue of getting information out to the people who would be most likely benefit from this senior housing. Is it the newspaper? Probably not the best means of communicating with those people. Let's get creative about how we get the information out to those who need it.
Well, Mayor's pretty good about that. On Facebook, where they're the biggest 21,000 people on that page. But
And that's where perhaps
some seniors.
our landlord tenant relations council can be pretty helpful, helping spread the word a bit. And maybe that's where our, landlord tenant relations council can be a bit more helpful with helping spread the word. We've got some awesome volunteers on that know how to make flyers and get them out in different ways, so I think we can definitely be creative with getting the word out.
Another thing that Jen mentioned, which I think is very appropriate, is the Office for the Aging.
Oh, yeah.
And also DSS, who would have low income Medicaid, Medicare people on their lists. And so both those forces would be good.
But they may have people too on their list, so that have been in New Paltz and have those points, so we want to make sure that, my incentive is to outreach the people that are already on the affordable housing list, of course, if they qualify, if they're seniors, so that they're, they understand that it's a little bit different and they might be able to take action.
Can we put something in our water bill
Sure.
I was just gonna say something, a water bill newsletter.
Do that, put in the market.
All of the above. Did you have a follow-up question, Tony?
No.
Thank you, Terry,
Thank you.
everybody else.
Okay, so the next agenda item here, or no, I'm certainly no other public comments. So Dylan, did you want to come to the table and talk to us about speed limits?
All right, speed limits.
You guys want to leave? I'm sure it's gonna be really riveting conversation.
Feel free to sit down.
Thank you, I'm gonna talk to you.
Yeah, grab a seat.
Let me allocate. So, not to do some sharing, but I won't be able to.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Anyway, I think I can go ahead. I'll do it. Yeah, so as previously stated, my name is Dylan Viscoso. I just wake up and spin a wheel and decide what I'm gonna do in a day, so now I'm trying to speed limits. As full disclosure, I am a member of the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee. I'm also the vice chair of the Transit Riders and Intermodal Advisory Committee for the county. I am also the 25 miles per hour campaign manager for the New York Bicycling Coalition under a grant for People for Bikes. That last one is a paid position. I'm not currently being paid and I'm not having this. I, over a year ago, set up a petition basically asking for this exact thing. And I never really thought I would have the background and knowledge to go forward, so I'm very excited. Just as a bit of a background, in 2022, New York State passed legislation allowing for suburban towns, villages, and cities to reduce their area speed limit from 30 to 25. While that's awesome, the big issue in New Paltz is the streets where people speed are main streets that the state owns and maintains, so we don't have control over them. So even if we do, and I want to start with this, if we do implement a 25 per mile speed limit instead of 30, it's not going to fix everything. But looking at the legislation, there are certain things you could do to have that change affect people's behavior, even if it's on a state road. Basically, I have it here. So I set up a presentation for the municipal officials conference in Isambo, and they had a very large poster kind of talking about why, how, and who's done it so far. So I consolidated that into a document for you guys. Very quickly, I just wanted to go through. So why fewer crashes. When people go slower, there's more time to react to pedestrians. They have a wider side vision kind of scope. And when people do get hit by a car, they will be injured less and they will die less. And I have a study here, I think it's from around 2011 by TAPT for the two graphs. At 30 miles per hour, there's a 50% chance of severe injury, being a pedestrian hit by a vehicle. Going down to 25 miles per hour reduces that to 30%. So that's almost a 50% reduction just by lowering it by 5 miles an hour. Additionally, I mean, I'm not gonna go point by point. People driving slower would be better for our community. I'm moving my grandma up here and I want her to walk around without me fearing for her life every day. And I've personally had to jump back on the sidewalk in front of Starbucks because people just speed down the hill and so this is something that's very close to me and I understand that, but I've also done a lot of due diligence to ensure that it's worth any form of effort. Going into the how, there's 3 main steps that every municipality needs to do. The state of New York Transportation Department hasn't provided a supplement for the new manual for standardized control devices. So there's a bit of a discrepancy between what the federal level is doing and what the state DOT is kind of using as a regulation. But the state has basically 3 main things you have to do. The first one, which is the hardest hurdle, because of people not understanding what it entails because there's no clear direction. And there's also a price to it unless you want to do it grassroots with willing volunteers. But that would basically be any type of investigation that looks at the village of New Paltz and can say, going to 25 miles an hour is in compliance with the manual of standard controlled traffic devices, which it is. They just want to ensure a professional engineer signs off on that. And that I've seen, the city of Albany had a 2-page one, Poughkeepsie had 57. It could be a very kind of deep investigation, but it can also be taking information that's publicly available and just looking at it. As a quick kind of thing as to what a traffic investigation actually entails, if you look at the last page, they've moved away from something called the 85th percentile, which basically, if people speed, it was very hard to change the limit to try to reduce speeding because they just accepted it. Now they allow people to use what's called the 50th percentile, which is, it allows for a lower targeted speed and therefore posted speed. And the biggest part is, instead of road studies mostly just being counts, speed, what the cars are doing, these types of street investigation studies, they allow you to take into context crashes that have happened, which I'm sure are considered, but also things like demographics, the actual use of the roadway besides vehicles, which is very high. And yeah, it's, the biggest thing is the investigation, but it's very doable because the requirement is very simple. And as long as you have someone sign off on it, there's people who have done literally nothing as an investigation and they've been fine, but I would never advocate for that. The second step would be passing a municipal resolution. People have done it in a number of ways. It's on the case study section, but they usually either kind of rewrite their whole traffic section, they give the authority to the DPW superintendent. There's many ways to do it. You basically change your code so local roads that are maintained by the village that are not state or county roads or otherwise excluded are now area speed limit of 25 miles per hour. Meaning if there's a sign or not, you're expected to be going 25 miles per hour and any 31s would have to be replaced for the village. And the last part of it is a signage plan to replace those signs. And I think I spoke enough. The last page is just some case studies, Albany, Brighton, and Scarsdale. I want to provide you one of each of the municipalities and just what their report said, what the law says, and a short piece of background on when they did it. But yeah, I found myself a very rare opportunity where I got to do all the research ahead of time and just kind of give it to you guys. And I understand this doesn't mean that it's very possible, but I want you to know you have an advocate for this. There's very strong community support for it. And whatever capacity you're able to provide, I know Bike Head is willing to back me up because I've ensured that the committee is behind this initiative. And finally, these are where proposed speed limit signs would be. They wouldn't be facing the state roads, but at the crossings. For instance, I think Sunset or one of the ones going up towards 32, there's a really small village portion, which you might be able to put a sign on. But the main thing I wanted to reiterate is the section between the red bridge at the bottom of the hill and the corner where Lola's, the jewelry shop and the new restaurant is. That is maintained by the village according to the roadway viewer. That means that in both directions, you could put a sign that says village speed limit 25 miles per hour, and it's fully within your right. And it would allow you to influence people's speed instead of going 30 when they see a 25 or 35 when they see a 30, they'll go 30 instead of going 25. But yeah, and I'd love to, I did a lot of research, but I also understand everything online is not. So I'd like to know kind of what you guys got stuck on before and if it's even worth pursuing.
I mean, the challenge that we have is they have to do the speed study and then you have to petition New York State.
So you don't, that's for the Main Street.
Right, I mean, I don't know that it's really worth the effort to put in speed limits on roads where you can't actually go very fast. I mean, I'm a big proponent of you know, having roads being difficult to speed on because that's how they're designed. And that's fortunately how our village streets are designed. So I don't know that we would gain a whole lot by lowering the speed on roads that people are already not speeding on. They're generally speeding on the highways.
So the two main things that I thought would benefit from this, despite the issue with the state, is doing an area speed limit, but enforcing future requests, especially with consolidation. If there are residential streets and there's any type of 25 mph, you'll have a little more evidence for a DOT request for a street like North Manheim. And the second thing is, this would be primarily at points of entrance where the village road starts or the sign would be visible from state roads. It would not fix the solution, but it would be an integral part of it. I think the cost benefit analysis could be worth it. Because I mean, what's happening in New Paltz right now, I understand the limitations of the municipality and NYS DOT and money and everything. But I personally don't feel safe walking around Main Street. I don't like going single file in the main area of it. And
I proposing to put a speed limit on village streets only.
that's what an area speed limit is, yes.
Right.
So
And then you think that would actually do anything?
So based on the points that I saw, or the points that I put on the map, those signs would be visible from state roads, or they would fully go through them while on two portions of the state road. So anyone coming from the mountains would see that the speed limit for the village area is 25 mph.
I was gonna say, like, this map has me kind of thinking like an aha moment, like, oh, that might kind of make people think 25, even when they're approaching the roads that we can't change to 25. You know, because it's not like it's 25 with an asterisk, like, except for the excluded parts, the way the resolution would be written, right? So the visibility of the signage, I think actually might help. And then, we had a great idea. It was, Bill and then Michelle, years ago, like doing just also an outreach campaign. I pledged to drive 25. And it's funny, I still think that in my head every time I'm like driving a car. So it worked on me without even being put into place.
There's only two other things I wanted to mention.
Do you think there's any issue, because my understanding of an intersection that involves a DOT street, it's considered a DOT intersection.
So you could put it on whatever jurisdiction they have in roadway, you could put it wherever it is closest. I mean, I don't have the answer for that, but
Like, we technically don't do the crosswalks on DOT intersections, even if it's across our street. Like a good example would be Hasbrook Avenue. That's a DOT intersection. We're not allowed to put the crosswalk down.
I understand, but I'm actually talking about speed limits right now. And the speed limit signs.
I'm talking about intersections, because you're pointing out intersections.
No, but the intersections where village property crosses with the county or the town, but I'm not saying exactly put it at that intersection. I'm saying the village portion that's closest to that, you would be allowed to put a sign. I'm not saying where to put them, I'm simply putting in terms of eligibility. On the village owned roads, you would be able to put the speed limit signs where people, especially in Subset, would be going into a residential area and know that there's a lower speed limit, which I know people have advocated for in the past. So I understand that it's not going to solve all the solutions, but I personally believe that it's worth looking at it. And I think a lot of things can be done with the cost where you can do a lot of grassroots efforts, utilize the signs that are already in place of the signboards, and also utilize urban tacticalism, which Rosendale does just to get 30 miles an hour with this turtle signs. As a last point, I want to point out that legislation is constantly being pushed forward to allow municipalities to have more control on local roads. And this would be a prerequisite for that, I would assume, or at least provide substantial evidence that we are dedicated to complete streets and they make sense in terms of traffic engineering.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think my sense when this law was passed, this was kind of a complete street checkbox of sorts.
What happens for a road like Henry W, where half the road is village, the other half is the town? Because, I mean, I travel that road.
That's a very good question, and it actually points to something where, especially with current events, non-suburban towns, which the town of New Paltz is, it's not eligible for this change. So depending on what you do with consolidation, this might be for nothing, but you also are given a 2-year kind of window where you're allowed to transfer laws over. And if in that window you provide a rationalization for keeping the speed limit, I don't find any case for someone telling you to raise it back up. And yeah, I'm not advocating for a town-wide 25 miles per hour speed limit, because that's a little crazy.
Yeah, that's why I put this in as 180, or considerations different for a town or a village.
Yeah, and the reason is not because of town versus village versus city versus hamlet, it's because of census.
Meaning what?
Because like, so the village is more dense, our census tracts, and so we are eligible because we're considered like more suburban under this qualification, not like under HUD and stuff. Whereas town outside village right now does not have that density.
And that's probably why you wouldn't want a town-wide speed limit of 25.
Right. Which is.
Because then you're gonna run into the same issue that we were just discussing, where our laws being enforced. I don't feel like we should be instituting laws that can't be enforced.
I would absolutely advocate for enforcement, which is a part of the plan.
But if you put the speed limit at 25 on roads, not village streets,
I'm not advocating for that.
and then that's when people do not think that laws need to be followed.
I understand, and I said specifically, I don't believe in a townwide 25 miles per hour area speed limit. I think it would be overkill, but if consolidation does go through, you could double the town, bless you, the town sentence area that's downtown, that can be designated as 25 miles per hour, and you would have a very good case against the DOT. Because.
Yeah, it wouldn't have to change.
No, you
because
could
it's
keep
still-
the village at 25 on the village roads, even if it becomes a town, that area still exists. And then within the code, if it ends up being a village, I mean, you wouldn't make an area speed limit 25 or even in a town. But doing things like this can provide residential streets the opportunity to advocate for slower speeds. I noticed North Manheim has a 25 mile per hour speed limit that was done in 2007. So it's obviously possible and rationalized with the density of the village. But I do want to say that I don't think these should just go on streets where people are not going to listen. I think doing it very strategically at crossings where the New York State roads are nearby, and also utilizing tactical urbanism to use yard signs and other factors to enforce this, or to advocate for it and have enforcement such as like the campaigns the county does, where it's literally just a flashing sign. They could be having a week of and tickets, but it's very little work. I understand that it's not going to solve the entire solution, but I'm also not saying just to implement it as is. I'm saying to do it in a very strategic way to conserve the village safety, and also just the control you have over local roads before you become a town that has less jurisdiction in the state, at least under the DOT.
So Dylan, we've been discussing this topic for years and years and years. Like,
Yes.
this is not, it's like I'm a big proponent of this, if we can do it, but I'm also like a big proponent of pursuing stuff that we can cross finish lines with. So we need a way to perform that study, that speed study.
Yeah.
Right, and we need a model law. So if we have those two things, then we can continue.
Cool. So I got an official quote for you guys, from an engineering firm, and they said around $5,000. That's not an exact number that we can't hold them to, but looking at the village and doing a little more of the plans for the engineering investigation, that's what it would cost. And then looking at the diagram I provided under it, it could be anywhere from 6,000 to 11,000 if you change the entire sign and postage. The posting and all the reflective gear, that can be cut in half as long as all of the poles are up to compliance. You just need to change the actual sign. So you could get this done for under $10,000. I'm not an accountant, so I would double check this.
Yeah.
But it's very doable. It will cost money, but I believe it's worth it. And there is a path forward, and I'd be very happy to write model law.
How many signs?
I estimated for 20. I don't think that many would be necessary.
And I think, like, it might be worth, just like going on a bike ride one afternoon and looked at this map and seeing where there already are village posts of some kind near these locations, like, and just kind of like actually look at the number more so. Kind of like we did back in the day with like handicap parking and stuff, just like actually physically taking what the map is and the proposed before we put it in code, right?
Absolutely. And from what I've understood, the limitation has been having to go through the DOT for any type of approval. This law allows you to do it within your own jurisdiction without any touching of the state.
Yeah,
As long as you do a written letter signed by a PE that says it's within compliance of the MUTCD, there's nothing they can do because you're within the law. People have touted that law and done the bare minimum, if nothing at all, and they've been fine. So there's a path forward. It's not free, but you also have a committee who's willing to do a lot of grassroots work. And there's a very recent speed study for word recalls, which I don't know what the status is of that yet. But I know it's either in the works or close to being done. And that information could be used to rationalize a speed study, even though it's not for village streets, because it would estimate general flow of the village.
A little closer to home is Kingston. Have you done research in what they're doing?
I've talked with the person who got in there to do it. So
They're a city, so it's very.
Yeah, it's
they are,
different.
it's a very, very different situation.
Yeah, in
Because,
terms of public response, but
And also state roads.
yeah.
yeah. So it's, and they actually have a very good example of the main thing that I'm advocating for here. If you've ever gone up 32 North, which I'm sure one of you two have done once or twice, there's a speed limit sign for the city speed limit on Route 32 because they maintain that section.
oh
And
yeah,
that's the same thing you could do between the bridge and that four-way intersection, and it's completely legal, and it would help all of the traffic coming in west would understand that's the area of speed.
yeah, and that is like a psychological sign in a big way, it's like, whoa.
And people currently see 30 and going 35. If you want people to drive 30 miles an hour, you have to set it to 25.
Yeah,
Because they know they have that 5 mile per limit. And I know this is gonna be pushing the barrier, I think, especially because towns have not done a lot with this. But I also think New Paltz is a perfect place to do it because we're in the middle of consolidation. We have a community that really cares and we have a very dense downtown area where people are forced to walk to and up because they don't have transportation. So there's a lot of limitations and a lot of them are with money in the state, but I still truly believe it's worth it because at the end of the day, someone will be hurt a little less, or someone might not have a severe injury or something might not happen. And it will set the road for a lot more tangible things, such as advocating for Main Street to be 25 miles an hour in the sections where it makes sense.
So what do like our state representatives say when you ask them, why don't they ask for the speed limit to be reduced on our state roads where it's incredibly dense, like our Main Street? Because, you know, then you could accomplish everything that you're talking about if the DOT was petitioned and the speed limit was lowered on Main Street, because then you would have signs on Main Street.
But then the rest of the village would still be 30.
But there's no signs that say 30 on all these individual streets.
Okay, I understand what you mean.
So to me, that would make infinitely more sense as far as like coming up with a solution that actually addresses what we really need addressing.
And you don't think implementing it as an area speed limit will provide any leverage towards that and help with future efforts and be worth the cost?
I mean, I feel like if the governor wanted to do that, they would have done it years ago when she wrote the law.
Well, I don't really have access to the governor, so I'm just doing the work where I can.
I mean, like what we have now is just like a big mess.
Absolutely, but I think New Paltz.
So why do we have to have a 30 mile an hour and 35 miles an hour on our Main Street, which is the pedestrian portion for the Empire State Trail?
That's absolutely true, but that's a separate issue. I understand.
That to me is the thing that makes a whole lot more sense. Like, how is North Chestnut Street, where we're walking the governor's talk by being a pro-housing community, changing our zoning to encourage density so people can live in this community.
But then we're still gonna have 30 miles an hour on those residential streets.
I do have to say, the village policies for sidewalks and pedestrian usage seem pretty outdated, which I think is because of the lack of volunteer support, but we definitely can do things on a local level too. I know
Policies for sidewalks?
I believe the last sidewalk plan was done in like 2009 or 2011, and then the last complete streets policy has been a while, or whatever comprehensive plan we have for bike ped.
Okay, anything else?
That's gonna be all.
This is
Um,
great, thank you.
Mike, so we're gonna talk about your proposal regarding changes to the zoning code.
So I realize you're kind of getting bombarded with a lot of local law questions tonight, and I'll be brief, but I want to give you a bit of an overview here, so. Here's a copy of each of you. Tim already has one. This is also, there's a link in the computer for this, but I wanted to print it out so you could see it. First, to sort of give you a little background. When you guys first hired me, May of last year, one of the first things I did is read through the zoning, the subdivision, the comprehensive plan. And realized that the zoning code is written in 1977. There was a pretty substantial update in 1990. Since that time, it's been piecemeal changes ever since. Now watching the planning board in action for a year, seen a lot of sort of bad practices that exist in the code and good practices that exist in the code. But I see the ability that we could tweak and more modernize it. So for the last like 6 to 9 months, I talked to you about this a while ago. Whenever I got some free time, I've been working on this. What I'm presenting now, and it's in the agenda, and you have links to every document, but the first document is just an overview of the changes. It's essentially 51 points that I just kind of wanted to go over verbally tonight. I'm not gonna go over all the other stuff. Please look at it on your own time. There's a red line version that explains all the changes pretty clearly. All the schedules, some of which were seriously out of date, have now been updated. I also did a chart of like the current code versus for titles and topics of how that all worked. So the first thing I found was that, before I go in, did any of you have any questions about what I just said so far? Okay. The first thing I found is that the current code didn't flow smoothly at all. It was very hodgepodge. Things were kind of all over the map where they were located. So one of the first things I did is I went in and reordered it to be a more sequential flow in the code to sort of mirror how the planning board works. I also looked, your definitions were severely lacking of definitions. There were uses and accessory uses that are in the schedule of uses that didn't have definitions. So I've now gone through, you're gonna see a lot of changes in the definitions. You'll see some changes, you'll see some brand new ones. Now, the good parts, the site plan, the special use procedure were really well done. The zoning district standards and dimensional requirements were pretty good. The floodplain area, that's straight from the state, I barely touched that. The ZBA, the parking standards, left them alone for the most part. Administration and enforcement, left that alone. Interpretation, application and amendment of the code. So there's a few sections that are almost in the code, carryover is in black. There's some sections that are almost entirely still in black. Couple changes I'm recommending for the zoning district. One is to get rid of the F zoning district, the floodplain. It's very outdated concept. It should be an overlay zone because FEMA set, the floodplains don't know parcel boundaries. You could have a very large parcel that a little bit of it's in the floodplain and the rest isn't. So what I recommend, and many other codes do, is you do an FD overlay. That whatever the current, and the FEMA is constantly updating the floodplains. So this way, the FD overlay mirrors that zone at the moment of an application. The other thing is you have a number of village and town-owned properties that I'm proposing we create a zoning district called Village Community Services. That's this building, the rail trail, the Ann Oliver House. Right now, they're in a hodgepodge of zoning districts. There's no point in them being in a zoning district. If you ever sell off the property, you can assign it to a zoning district at that time. It makes no sense for them to be included. That's not as urgent a thing, but it's just a recommendation to consider. Schedule A, which is the schedule of use standards. There were a lot of uses in there that were just, the text of the schedule and the text of the code didn't match each other. And now in my proposal, it matches the actual code. There also were a lot of uses that were basically similar, like you had a shoe store and a clothing store and all these different uses, they're all retail. There's no reason to differentiate unless it's a special specific use like a laundromat or something like that, which is going to use a lot of water. But a clothing store, a shoe store, they're going to have this, there's no difference really, they're just selling something different. So I basically gathered all that together in retail use. And one of the proposals is there's two categories of retail use. One is a low impact retail use, which is based on square footage of the use. I threw out a random number. I think it was 3,000 square feet or 2,500 square feet for the defining of the difference between low impact and larger impact. We can certainly play with what that number should be, but really, your zoning should only look at the impacts. So that's my recommendations there. I'm up to number 6 here. We make provisions for uses which are not in the schedule of uses. Many outdated zoning codes, the first thing they say is if the use isn't listed in our schedule, it's prohibited. You can't do it. The more modern way is to say, this board here is the legislative boards. You're the ones who are responsible for the actual laws of the village. If somebody comes up with a use, they get to petition this board, they come to the board and say, I'd like to add this, or to do this use on this property. It's not mentioned in your zoning code. Certainly if it's not allowed in a district, but it's allowed in another district, that's another story. But uses, you know, we're in modern times, things are evolving very quickly, new uses are coming up. This way, the building department can send it to this board, say, please review this use. If this board, you go through a public hearing process, if this board decides, yes, this is a use we're going to allow in X zoning district, it becomes a special use permit requirement, it goes to the planning board, it now gets established for future uses that are the same type. So basically what you've done is you've just added a new use. You don't, by doing that, you're pseudo amending your zoning code, but you're not really amending your zoning code. It's just a more modern way than to say, if your use isn't listed, you can't do it. It's a more business friendly type of thing. I'm proposing adding a new section about prohibited uses where they're spelled out. You currently have a couple. I'm proposing adding junkyards or dismantling operations in a village that doesn't have particularly large parcel sizes. Are there a couple parcels where you could do it? Yeah, maybe, but I would propose that we just ban them within the village and prohibit them. And those are also covered by state laws anyway, but you know, in the town would be another story. In the village, there's really no place for them. This may sound minor, but changing the word regulations throughout the code to standards, it's just a more modernized word. It tends to carry a little bit of different meaning, even though it doesn't. We're gonna create clear development and dimensional standards. Again, that section of the Schedule B is again the same problem, that there's a lot of discrepancies between the text of the code and the actual chart. This is a big change, number 12. What I'm proposing is on a residential property that you would allow somebody to create 2 separate dwelling units independent of each other. The current code requires them to be combined into one structure. Why is this important? Well, as long as density can be met, and that's the key. You still have to meet density. Why this is important is when you're forced 2 buildings together, you end up with essentially 2 single-family homes connected. I've seen already in a couple of examples, it kind of becomes a little bit of a habit trail kind of thing. By allowing them to be 2 separate structures visually, people don't know where, village lots are small. People don't know unless they actually know where the lot lines are. So when you look and you see 2 buildings, they could be 2 buildings on 2 parcels. They could be 2 buildings on 1 parcel. It creates less of a visual noise, for lack of a better way to say it. So that is that's a big proposal, because I have talked to the mayor about it, and he sort of put me into the background of why it was changed to that. So it's something, don't have to talk about it now, but think about it. I think my own personal view is it will be a good improvement. We would establish standards for parcels where multiple uses will be allowed. I'm proposing a density bonus in situations where somebody is going to 100% use green energy, or somebody is going to do 100% affordable housing. Now, your code says that 10 units or more, you have to do these. But suppose a 2-family house came in, or somebody wanted to do a 2-family, and they said, hey, I'm gonna make both units be, for sale or rental, make them affordable. Well, if they can fit it in, let's give them a little bit of a density relief to allow them to make, provided water and sewer and everything else can be met, but let's give them a little bit of relief to the density standards to create more affordable housing units.
So that's in the R zones, right?
Yeah, those would be in residential in the R zones, yeah.
Isn't there something weird, like when you actually crunch the numbers in the R zones, like the square footage sometimes doesn't make sense?
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes the square footage creates the need to come for a variance. But I haven't found that a lot yet.
I remember there was some proposal a couple of years ago, and it did seem like the way our maximum building size was relative to the lot size, like it didn't actually add up. There was some.
There are parcels where it doesn't. There absolutely are parcels where it doesn't. And let's be honest, there's not a lot of vacant lots sitting around that people are gonna build a single family house on. There's not, one of the first things I looked at was your subdivision code. And then I realized there's very few lots in this village that can be subdivided. So with that being said though, this could potentially lead to a single family house where somebody could build another unit, not an ADU, but a second single family house, where they could then, if you give them a little bit of leeway, and I don't know what the numbers would be, we'd have to figure that. A lot of these are concepts at this point. And just let me also preface, I'm not anticipating that this is something we're gonna push through and adopt in the next month or 2, or even 3 maybe. But I wanted to get this out to you to start thinking about. So your point is really good though, Tim. That's not gonna affect an awful lot of properties, but any win you can get to me is a win. If you can get more affordable, if you can get green energy.
But there's no other carrot for green energy or.
I don't know what else you can give as a carrot, because the carrot is essentially the ability to make more profit.
Yeah,
either from a rental market or from a sale market.
yeah, and since we updated B2 and NBR, that density penalty goes away.
Right, right, but the NBR is, there are still parcels left that can be developed, but it's chipping away pretty quick. So this would allow the potential, and it would be select parcels that it could physically work on, you know, you don't wanna do it on parcels where, and I don't know what that bonus would be, you know, we would have to figure out if you could get another bedroom or something like that. Maybe even a single family house where we only allow a 3-bedroom, well, if you do all affordable, you can get a 4th bedroom. I'm just thinking off the top of my head right now, but
Yeah.
some sort of bonus could be allowed for residential specifically. And not necessarily multifamily residential, so I'm talking 1 and 2 family. Cause we do sort of hear from people, and I don't know that I follow the train of thought that families are looking for affordable housing. But the need from the list that the affordable housing clearly is, it's 1 and 2 person
Yeah.
groups, so, one thing is to allow for adaptive reuse of parcels and set standards for each. This, stops the need from knocking down a facility that may be perfectly good and rebuilding it to a new use. You may need to be some leeway in how it's done and used, but it allows for adaptive reuse. This is a key one I hadn't thought about, but it came up fairly recently. If somebody is building parking inside or below a structure, they might need an exception for our height laws rather than going for a variance. Our code would just say, and the bonus is they're creating less impervious surface because they're not having to do parking next to the building, they're doing it under or in the building itself. But by doing that, they're now raising it up 1 more floor. So potentially, the idea is that it would need a variance. One thing I'm proposing is design standards for any development along the major state roadways, 208, 299, 32, that would require 2 different types of building materials. We're kind of seeing that already, but this would codify it and say you have to do it that way.
What if there's speed signs?
Vintage.
Another thing is to actually list in the code building design preferences, not mandates, but it gives the planning board a little more authority, and it would mirror our comprehensive plan. We wouldn't just come up with things out of the blue. But what I put in, and full disclosure, I borrowed an awful lot of this stuff from my 15 years of code writing for town of Rochester. I put in some design preferences. We don't call them standards over there and that. Where the planning board can kind of say, and we can even put pictures in where you say, you're gonna build this, we'd really like it to look like this. And if people were given an example, they'll more often than not go that direction. This is a key one, and we sort of heard it tonight with the woman who spoke about the lighting. Currently in the code, there's a section of this building standards that are only really in play during planning board review. They're not necessarily enforceable. It's a gray area whether they're enforceable or not. They're in the zoning code, but they really relate to the permit stage, nothing else. So like outdoor lighting, you don't need a building permit to put up an outdoor light. So we really have no jurisdiction over that. So this would make these particular ones, water and sewer, sewage, flammables, these are all sort of standard things. Some of them are already covered in state building code. And noise being one, I know you have a noise ordinance, but this would give, this list would also give the planning board the ability to look at these items while they were reviewing projects. I would like to establish buffers from residential to commercial properties, so if somebody is proposing a commercial directly next to a residential, they, at least it's looked at. These next to any disturbance greater than 1 acre, you're not gonna have a lot of that in the village, but you have some, or any development on slopes greater than 15%. That they become a mandatory special use, no matter what the use is that you're doing. And prohibit any development on slopes of 25% or greater. Again, those are not big, high issue items in the village, but it's just a recommendation. The next one goes back to the woman. I would like to propose that we have outdoor lighting standards. And you actually need permits, not necessarily for residential outdoor lighting, there we would have standards. But any commercial, somebody's changing the lights on the side of their building, if somebody's, that they have to follow the standards and the code enforcement. It would give some sections would just be straight review by the building inspector, other sections would require review by the planning board. But you will see in the red line, it's quite a lengthy section with a lot of pictures and examples. Building on the landscaping standards that we already have some good ones, but I wanted to build on them a little more and allow the planning board to establish a performance guarantee for landscaping. Right now, we can do performance guarantee for buildings, for driveways, water and sewer. I don't believe we have one in there for landscaping. Why that's important is somebody plants, some 3-foot trees and a year later they're all dead. If we have a performance guarantee, we can go in, replace them and use their money and make it, stormwater management standards, being an MS4 community, we already have that, but I wanted to build a little bit more for planning board review. We're gonna keep the use and most dimensional standards. I am proposing one change in the NBR, the side yard is proposed as, or is in there as 0 to 15 feet. It's not physically feasible because all these projects by New York State Fire Code require 2 means of access. And with only a 15-foot setback from the lot line, you can't build them. So what I'm proposing, I think, was raising it to 0 to 30. And, if they can move it all the way to one side and create access on one side, and maybe and encourage shared access too, like the success we had on the 147, 149 property. With 145, they're going to share access. I'm proposing a new Schedule A1, which would be a supplemental standard for accessory structures, which the code enforcement officer or building inspector can just look at the list. Somebody wants to put in a shed in this zoning district. This needs a building permit. This needs a site plan. Establish standards for swimming pools. They're already in state code, but adding them into our code doesn't hurt because then it's right in people's faces. Clarify fences and wall standards. There's a little quirky thing of people will, for height of fences, people will build a berm at the bottom of the fence and kind of raise up the ground and then, it's only a 4-foot fence, when really they just built a 6-foot fence because they built a 2-foot berm. This will say measured from the grade of the land, not, you can't build a berm and then build a fence on top of it. I don't know if the village has had issues with that, other places have. Animal husbandry, it's an old word, but it is the word that's used in zoning. You have in your animal section a very good code about beekeeping and chickens. What I would propose is bringing that code almost word for word from there into the zoning code. It's really a land use code. It's people get confused when they have to hunt and go all around. This way, we would remove it from there. We would keep the animals to be cats and dogs, normal household pets, but then I would propose moving that. I would add a code section for conversion of residential or non-residential structures to a more intensive use. We don't really have anything like that. Dumpsters, we do a pretty good code for, but I would make a recommendation that they must be either in the rear or in screened side yards, and the same with those clothing drop-off boxes and things like that. They don't seem to be quite as popular as they were 10, 15 years ago. Every business in the world had one previously. They seem to have gone away, but still we want to just not have that be the forefront of our community. The ADU code you have written, I think it's really well done. We leave that alone. Home occupations, what I'm proposing is changing it to a type 1, type 2, type 3. Type 1 being the really simple, it's a lawyer's office in their house. Type 3 being something a little more intensive, there's more public back and forth. There would be a set of standards. Some of them would just need they're all an accessory use, but some of them would just need a building permit. Others would actually need site plan or special use from the planning board. Signs, you will see there's a whole section now about signs with dimensional standards, prohibited, definitions, ton of pictures. And it just makes it's based a little bit on the way the city of Kingston did their model form-based code with the sign section. Dennis Doyle a few years ago clued me into it. I looked at it. I really love the way they do it. I've sort of taken the Mike Beatty version of the way they do it and put it in our code. There would be a new section for off-street parking and loading in the code. It's currently buried kind of in the code. This would be a standalone article, but it's going to maintain most of the current code. The code we have for parking and loading is very well done. Except we would add electric vehicle charging station requirements for certain projects. And we would add in the code ADA parking requirements. They already exist, but it's better for the planning board, for code enforcement, if it's right in our code. It matches this, it's a state code. The site plan review is, again, it's kind of buried in our code. That would be a whole article about site plan. We would require review using the Ulster County core habitat areas when they're identified. The parcel viewer, I know you're a big fan of it, does a great job of showing core habitat areas. It gives the planning board a little bit more review standards. We would allow the planning board to require photo simulation, which for a larger project is happening already. But it's really easy to take an image of a drawing and overlay it over a photo these days. It used to be hard. You can do, Photoshop, you can do, or any computer, not any, but many computer programs would do that. Fee schedule. Right now, if somebody is making an amendment to an approved site plan, the code calls for, if it's 50% or less, they pay 50% of the original application fee. If it's more, they pay 75%. It's not really fair. Say, I'll use the senior housing project. They're coming back to us next week to add some fences to their project that they didn't put in their original design. It's minor. It's really, really minor. But they have to come back to us for site plan. We shouldn't be charging them 50% of what they paid for the review of the entire project. So Alex and I have, but the code currently in the code itself, it's not just in the pricing schedule. So I'm proposing we remove that and we just bill based on, this would be an accessory structure. It's a $250 charge, and it's very fitting for what they're doing. They're adding like 60 feet of fence. But otherwise I have to charge them a huge amount of money. It would also create a minor site plan category, which would give our building department a lot more leeway on certain types of residential primarily. However, I know the planning board likes, and the village board likes them to be informed. So what I'm proposing is that minor site plan, every time the planning board meets, the building inspector would refer all of the minor site plans that have accumulated since the last meeting. It would give the board a chance to look at them, comment back, but what it does is it removes the public hearing fees, the site plan fees, the attorney fees. I feel like we're kind of, we're really pushing affordable housing and we're kind of making it hard for the little guy. Guy that wants to build a new porch on the back of his house has to go for site plan review. So, and certainly we can tweak the criteria for what is a minor site plan. Currently, the planning board can't approve extensions. Under state law, they can, but in our code, they can't. It's silent on it, so I'm gonna add language to allow for both site plan and for special use. They can, if somebody takes more than a year to start their project, they can come in, ask for an extension. We can grant them extensions. But we would put a limit on it, and there's also criteria, they have to show that they've actually done some work. They can't get an approval, do nothing, and then come back and go, I want an extension. You gotta show you've done something, whether you're trying to get funding, you're whatever. Currently, our code has the ability for the planning board to enforce special use permit violations. They absolutely have no power to do that. That should be removed from the code. I don't know how it got in there. It needs to go away. They can't initiate violations. They can notify the building department, but they can't initiate on their own. Then moving on to item number 50, there's a whole set of new kind of more modern uses. These are just thoughts on my part about making, a set of standards for these. I did add the adult use cannabis related businesses. I know currently that's treated as just retail, not otherwise named. It's a short section. Take a look, see what you think. I think it's fair. Animal boarding, I don't know if we have issues with kennels or anything like that, but I wrote, these are all very short sections. Contractor storage yards, I haven't seen a proliferation of them in the village, but I know there's a couple around making an actual use for them. Essential services is really emergency services, so I'm changing the name. Hotels, you want to kind of limit the percentage of gross floor area for accessory uses that they would have in addition to the hotel rooms. So we would set a percentage. Multifamily housing, I would propose a new section just about the standards of how the planning board reviews it. The next two are codes kind of silent on currently: display and sales areas and outdoor storage. So I would make them special use permits and go through a specific, more often than not, those will be accessory to another use, but it gives the planning board the ability to really review it carefully. I would propose moving the short-term transient rentals from the housing section to the zoning code. What you guys have is not bad. Tim and I talked about it. If you want to look at tweaking it, I have a couple model codes I could present. Currently, I left it as is. Solar energy, your code is silent on solar. Vehicle and equipment sales, service and repair, that's car dealers, tractor dealers, any of that kind of stuff. Writing a separate set of standards. Wireless telecommunication facilities, I don't know if there is one in the village anywhere. I don't know, is there one on the SUNY property? I don't know. But someday you may get an application for one. I will tell you, this code is one that I wrote for the town of Rochester.
I thought the wrinkle with that is that, like, we're largely just required to accept them, because.
Well, and that's what so what I did is, there are certain circumstances where you're required to accept them, but there are certain places where the municipality does have the ability to review and set standards like height, things like that. So what I wrote is, for the Rochester was, it's similar to the home occupation, where in this case, there's a type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. depending on what it is. Type 1 is like a co-location on an existing one. That's just a new antenna going on a new one. You know, that's minor. All the way to a type 4, which is a full wholesale, brand new one. What the code does, it gives you the authority to review the sections that the federal government has said you are allowed to review. And right now, your code has nothing about them. So,
I remember this being discussed a few years ago for a project and,
Yeah.
and I came away thinking, we don't have.
you know,
much of it.
but, and let me say this too, real quick. Part of this whole thing is with the potential that the village and town will be merging, whatever the term is, this will bring a 40 to 50-year-old code. Maybe, you know, depending on if you go back to 77 or 90, anywhere from a 25 to 50-year-old out-of-date code into a more modern, it will make it easier to assimilate it into the town code to merge the two together when and if that comes to fruition. And finally, non-conforming uses and structures, your code does the same thing I see time and time again, is it treats them the same way. They're two very different things. Non-conforming use is a use that predated zoning. It's not it may be a structure, it may not be a structure. Non-conforming structures are buildings that don't meet your code or they don't meet setbacks or something like that. The use might be perfectly allowed, but what I do in this non-conforming is separate the two very specifically. And then the schedules that I redid, mostly they maintain existing. The one thing I saw you didn't have in the zoning standards was a minimum lot width and depth. I threw a number in there of 100 feet deep and 50 feet wide, I think, or 40 feet wide, I don't remember. That may not be the right number. I put it in kind of as a placeholder. But if you look at like residential, you've got a 12.5-foot setback on either side. That's 25 feet already right there. So that allows another 25 feet wide of building. You know, certainly those numbers can be tweaked. I won't bore you with everything else. What I'm gonna ask is you look at it, shoot me emails, give me a call if you have any questions. I'm not available to come to your next meeting, but what I will propose is that I will come back at your first meeting in August, get feedback from you, see where we go from there. This has been looked at by Alex already, the building inspector. I have not shared it yet with anybody else other than Alex. I did send it to Will as a courtesy, but I said, don't spend a lot of time yet on it. Eventually, we would have to do referrals and things. So it's a lot, I know, and it may seem overwhelming, but I think it's something that no matter what happens, this is a good thing to do.
I really like, yeah, sorry, I just have to say something about the parcel viewer. I like how there's a bunch of things at the parcel viewer that like could be helpful, but aren't, and you kind of address those. Yeah.
So one thing to remember about parcel viewer is you have to take it with a grain of salt because the image and the lot lines are from two different sources and they can be off by, you'll see many times a lot line looks like it's going right through the middle of a building.
Oh, yeah.
They're off by as much as like I found is like 50 feet. And it's because they're from two very independent data sources and they don't overlay well.
Yeah.
So parcel viewer is a good way to get beginnings of information. It's a terrible way to look at, like, if I want to look at a floodplain, I go to the FEMA maps. The FEMA maps will take me within feet of where the floodplain line is. So, I just threw a lot at you. Anybody have any specific questions? Otherwise, I don't want to keep you any longer tonight than I have to.
Yeah, we can all go over this with you outside of meetings too.
Absolutely.
I would recommend that
And if you want-
individually or a couple of us do that, that would probably be.
And if it's worthwhile to have a like roll up our sleeves work session where we go through the code itself, which admittedly is 200 and some pages long.
Yeah.
I'm certainly willing to do that. You can schedule a special, don't take up your time in a regular meeting to do that. But I wanted to go through the highlights tonight, and hopefully I captured them.
Yeah, this is very helpful. I mean, for years, we've been hoping to update Schedule A, so the fact that that's.
Well, and B was even as bad as A.
Yeah. Well, this is very helpful, and you know, you've done even a lot more than that, so thank you.
Well, I know we had talked about doing it in little bits and pieces, but I realized it was so intertwined that it made it really hard, because if you change this and then you don't change this, you create discrepancies. So it just had to be like, which is why it took me 6 to 9 months of just diving in.
And I think it's important too, like whether or not the town and village do integrate at some point in the future, like this was designed with that possibility in mind.
Right, and the town code is out of date as well. I mean, I haven't
Yeah.
done a deep dive into it, admittedly. Some places they're really good, and other places it's like, yeah. Yeah, and the one thing you do get with me is many of these codes have been court tested already. And they won. So I can tell you.
Let's give them to Mustard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Like-
started identifying some of these updates that might be able to get us like some points on the housing smart communities and the things, so once I finish wrapping my brain around those, I definitely want to chat about that.
A quick question for, actually, for all of you, but for Tim, would you like me to share this with the planning board at this point, or should I wait until we talk more?
No, you can share with your planning board.
Okay,
I like that
and
idea.
I'll just tell them this is in a very informal thing at this point.
Yeah,
Okay, to start having them think about it.
have them start thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
Because the more
'Cause they
people,
will have
the more
the
people
biggest-
put eyes on it for
Yeah.
a greater amount of time, the more valuable.
Yeah, and I want to get Pat and, you know, as the fire inspector to put eyes on it, and Matt, but I started just with Alex because he's ultimately the one who has the sign off power on the majority of these things,
Yeah.
so.
Are you familiar with this, number 3 on this business agenda, planning board group email?
Yes, that's me.
What is that?
So we ran into an issue recently. So we had the group email, planningboard@villageofnewpaltz.gov. People email that email thinking that they're just sending it.
To you?
Maybe they think that, I don't know. It's going just me. Anything that goes there, we use that to forward to the group, just like you guys have yours.
Yeah,
Several members of the public have taken to sending things that are then showing up directly in the email boxes, personal email boxes of our planning board members, because they don't have village emails. I inquired as to the cost with Nancy and found out that it's astronomical. It's $16 per email address per month. So it would be almost $1,000 a year to add 5 email addresses for planning board members, which I'm not asking for. What I would like to propose is that we get one new one that we just use internally to share, and we're not gonna say what it is, to use as the new group name for me and for whoever, for you, me, Alex, to send emails to the entire planning board. And then we make the planning board at villageofnewpaltz.gov forward only to my email address. So anybody who submits comments to planning board at villageofnewpaltz.gov, it comes to me, I then record it, put it into, you know, whatever the process is for whatever the comment is. It seems to me that I've had 2 planning board members now reach out to me that are very concerned that they feel like they're being not harassed, but that they're getting emails directly from the public that's not coming to me at all, because I don't get the emails that come to planning board at Village of New Paltz. I get emails that come to planning zoning. So it's going directly to the members, and I don't want to name who, one member in particular was kind of really perturbed that this was happening and that he was being bombarded with emails.
yeah, I think we should be more careful with our time and not have that
Yeah.
email list go direct.
So with your permit, I was told by Nancy and Nicole that changing and adding any email addresses had to be approved by this board. I haven't explored with them the steps.
Is there another email address that we could remove in exchange for this new one?
I don't know that
Let's
answer.
ask that question.
Yeah,
But I think it makes a good.
but if not, we're talking $16 a month times $12, it's less than $200.
I can speak to this. So the email that planning board has is a Google group. So we can create as many email addresses as we want to at the .gov, at the villageofnewpaltz.gov that forward to other email addresses, but they're called Google groups.
Perfect. I'll get with you tomorrow. We'll figure it out. Never mind.
Absolutely. So I think that we need admin access to the Google console. So HRT might have to be the one to actually do that.
Okay.
But I'm gonna look at it after the meeting, and so I'll by tomorrow I'll have some info for you.
Perfect, and thanks for chiming in, because, yeah, this got thrown on like at the beginning of this week, because it kind of came to a head over the 4th of July weekend when a bunch of people emailed planning board and members got inundated with emails, and so I was asked to look into fixing it, so. Well, that's it.
Thank you.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
I'm gonna jump right into our next section about community communication. So for 4A, I'm putting together a memo in collaboration with staff from the college, just to help the community understand why we do hydrant flushing and, how it involves groundwater from time to time. And then another item has to do with the single hauler contract. I think what we figured out is that especially in the month of May in New Paltz, we end up with a significant amount of trash, recycling, and compost. And maybe there's an opportunity to designate May as like a trash month. Because one of the things that happens is that when there are holidays, especially in the month of May, then there are delays in terms of when trash is being dropped off, because it might not be the way it ordinarily would be Monday through Friday, when if there is a holiday, then everything gets pushed in the future, and then there's like shorter collection times where the trash and recycling is being picked up. So county waste actually has a smaller window if the holiday issue exists on a Saturday. So it's just something to be mindful of. We can talk about it in more detail. Another item regarding community communications is that the fire department solar project, we anticipate starting work towards the end of the summer, and then have that system be live by October. Then, as we discussed at our last meeting, there's an annexation petition, and our village attorney is working on preparing a draft resolution. Then in terms of grants that we're working on, we're gonna apply for the pro housing community CFA grant for improvements down at the sewer plant. We're gonna make the argument that, if we're going to support all this new housing, we have to have a well-functioning sewer plant. And we're also applying for WIDA, as we do every single time that there's a grant application available. And the CDBG for sewer improvements, we just got the engineering report back from our engineer. That's in the hands of our grant writer, so that is a very key component to the application for the sewer conveyance updates. And the next item is there's a new grant opportunity. It's called New York Bricks. I thought it made sense for us to apply because the initiative is coming from the governor's office. It's building upon Unplug and Play initiative to get kids off their phones by funding affordable sports and recreation programs. To me, that sounds very much like a skate park. So, our skate park project, we've worked on some design. Now we're working on money. We have recreation fees being collected from some of the larger projects that are being considered in our community. So this could be a way to augment some of that recreation fee money. So I'd like to move that we go ahead and apply to New York Bricks.
Second.
All in favor? And then moving on to item number 6, I move building claims. All in favor? Any PB update we want to share?
Ulster County Planning Board met last week. Last week, as you're aware, there was an announcement of $1 million grant from the way for water and sewer. And that an unnamed yet named award coming our way for housing excellence that will be bestowed with, and I think that's going to come fairly soon, I think within the next month or so. Our planning board met, the big item on the agenda was 7 Prospect Street. There were plenty of neighbors talking about what the project is and their dissatisfaction with what's going on in that project. And we're waiting for an engineer's report before going any further due to the runoff coming off that property. It's in a nutshell.
Any ZBA info to share? We haven't,
No meeting,
No meeting.
canceled, no,
Okay,
nothing on the agenda.
anything else from our board? No,
It's a full-on.
I moved to adjourn,
Second.
or did you? Mike?
I just gonna tell you real quick, the local government records management improvement fund grant that we applied for. I went back and looked, I knew it was supposed to have been announced, June 19th was the date that they were supposed to have announced, so I emailed them and I said, what's the deal? They said, yeah, we got behind, we're still reviewing the applications and we expect very soon. So I still think that we stand a really good chance, that was to digitize all our building.
Right, okay.
records. So we're still, fingers crossed that we get it. But
Excellent.
we should know soon.
Okay,
Cool.
so motion to adjourn,
Second.
all in favor, aye.
Aye.